Welcome to the world away.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust. Hey, traveller, planning your next overseas trip, perhaps a little Lux Valley getaway, some high-speed Japanese bullet train action, or maybe you are heading to Vietnam for a feast of fabulous food. Stay in touch with family and friends with a Saily eSIM app. Saily provides affordable, secure internet across the world without the bill shock when you get back home. To buy your eSIM, simply download the Saily app in the App Store on your phone and use our code The World Awaits at checkout to get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. Find out more in the show notes on our website at theworldawaits.au.
Welcome back to the world awaits. I hope you've all had a wonderful week. How's yours been, Belle?
Oh, I am pretty busy at the moment. Listen, first, I'm going to remind you that we have a giveaway. We've got a night stay and a buffet breakfast for two at the Novotel Melbourne Airport, just a few minutes walk from Terminal 4. Super convenient if you are coming to the airport from Country Vic or New South Wales, or you just need a night's transit stay in Melbourne. So to enter the competition, jump on our Instagram or Facebook to see the giveaway post. Like the post, make sure you're following us on the Novotel Melbourne Airport. And for an extra entry, tag someone you'd like to share the stay with. More details are also on our website at The World Awaits. And this feeds into your question, Kirsty, how my week has been. I will be back at the airport shortly as when this goes to air. I will be cruising through Japan's Seto Inland Sea with cruise line Mitsui, which is opening up its ships to foreigners. So it's cruising down by locals with all the Japanese traditions. Think Japanese toilets and sushi, and it's going to be great. So I'm getting ready. So I'm packing my bag. So that one, Kirsty, and reading all about dress codes on the ship, which is curiously prescriptive. So that's been my week. What about yours?
How exciting. And interesting you're reading about dress code. Such shits. There is a bit of a dress code on cruises. I actually wondered also when I went on cruises recently what to wear, but and there's definitely a bit of a code around it, isn't there? What did you find? Like I sort of typically just wore, took along some nice sort of linen clothes and flowery. Not that I have any flowery, but dresses.
I'm going to share this is my big budget travel hack, and that is go to Kmart, buy all of their linen wear, buy all the linen pants, buy the linen singlets. They are cheap. You just throw them in your bag and you pull them out, and suddenly you are like instant social, influencer. It's like you are basically influencer ready when you chuck that stuff on. They were very prescriptive, really not down for the activewear. I know on a lot of ship cruises I've been on, people just live in their activewear, prancing around on the deck and stuff. No to sportswear in anywhere where you're eating. They don't like thongs as well. They say kitten heels. Bad idea because you don't have that ankle strap on the back of them. So there's actually a mention in the dress code, don't pack your kitten heels. So I'm like, okay, what's that?
Yes, I definitely haven't seen activewear on cruise. No, I wouldn't have thought that was acceptable. In fact, I felt really awkward walking on the cruise in my activewear. Just going down to the gym even. Well, because everyone's always dressed so beautifully. And but I guess it depends. It depends on the cruise, where it is, obviously, which part of the world it is, the climate, all of those things. So, there's certainly, maybe this is a conversation that definitely we need to have at some stage. We'll do a little hot take on fashion.
Let's do a travel fashion hot take. I love it. Okay, great. All right, then. So what else has been going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically just getting back to the swing of things after Easter, really. It's been so busy, and we were down at Phillip Island, so had an amazing time down there. And I've got a last minute conference coming up in the US, which is exciting. And fingers crossed there are no issues because with the flight and everything, because as we record this, the world is facing a pretty huge fuel surcharges at the moment. So if you're a regular listener, you would have heard us flagging this and talking all about how the Middle East situation is affecting tourism and travel generally in our hot topic chat, which is episode 140. So go head back to that if you missed it. But since then, Air New Zealand has made even more reductions to its services, and Sky News reported it's also increasing the price of its airfares. So they had a New Zealand correspondent, Bridie Whitten, who was saying that it's the second time in nearly a month that Air New Zealand has cut flights.
Yeah, because they cut last month. They cut 5% of their flights, and from May and June, cutting even more and increasing costs as well. Air New Zealand did say a spokesperson from the airline said that jet fuel prices are more than double what they should be, and that's what's driving up higher costs. Jetstar has also cut its flights between Australia and New Zealand, with 55 flights cut from the May schedule between Auckland and Sydney, and Auckland and Brisbane most affected.
Yeah. And BBC says analysts warned that travellers should expect further ticket price rises and more cancelled flights as the conflict continues. This is interesting because some people are saying flight prices, I mean, obviously some flight prices, depending who you're booking with, like through the Middle Eastern carriers are going down. But then obviously other flight but then that was before the fuel surcharge. So the fuel surcharge is having a separate effect on the impact of of prices. Anyway, despite all of this, I actually interviewed Michael Zell recently, who is the GM of Australia's largest home-based travel advisor network. Travel managers, and I was interviewing him for Caroline, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. But he was saying that Australians are still booking a lot of European holidays for the peak season because Australian travellers are so resilient. And he was saying that they're just booking on non-Middle Eastern carriers, and their March figures, and they have hundreds and hundreds of travel advisors under their umbrella. The March figures were really strong, and it wasn't just for air, but also for land, cruise, and independent travel. So I guess it's a bit of a wait and see to see what those April and May stats show too. And in saying all of that, you and I are both traveling in April internationally, about.
I know, I know. I mean, we are in, it is the industry, but yeah, I mean, I'm flying to Tokyo and it is not cheap, but I do think that that is actually the perfect storm because Japan is super hot amongst Australians. So tickets are in hot demand. Also, it's spring and therefore peak cherry blossom season. And for the trifecta, it is also the Australian school holidays. So because I didn't want to pay a bazillion bucks on a direct flight, I am taking my newly minted 15-year-old as well. So we are flying with Garuda going up via Jakarta, which is actually not a bad route up to Tokyo because it's not a super long way out of, out of range. So, I mean, even flying back from catching the flight back, flying out wasn't so bad, but coming back into Australia, and this is why I know that it's that effect of school holidays. Coming back in, even flying Jetstar, which is not a direct flight, you've still got to hang around Cairns for a bit. That was more than $2,000 to $2,500 for that one return flight. Like, that's insane. That is absolutely.
Yeah, it is. Maybe we'll have to have Yasmin do a little podcast takeover session where she does a host takeover and talks about all of her travels, because that girl, my gosh, she is very well traveled, and yeah, she's incredibly articulate too. I think she'd make a great podcast host. I might hit her up about that. Anyway, I'm also flying to an event in the US with United, and look, we're obviously an anomaly because of our work, but as Michael says, the superannuation generation has incredible amounts of disposable income. But he also said it's not just that older generation, though, that there's also a lot of money in the Australian travel market across all generations, because these younger generations, like our kids, are actually highly prioritizing holidays. So as well as Europe bookings, he was saying that they're seeing a lot more demand for places perceived as safe, like Antarctica, and destinations like South Korea, on the back of Japan's popularity.
Yes, that is true. I think a part of it is that I think we're all just also in Australia very wary of being stuck the way that we were with COVID too. We knew that curtailed us, for those of us, and so many of us do have family not in Australia. We went years without seeing our families, particularly if you were like us and trapped in Victoria. And everyone's like, dude, I'm going to get out there now because you never know. As we know, every day that we talk about this, every day is a changing, crazy schedule decided by some rando bloke who, who doesn't impact on who I've never seen, I've never met, and yet he's changing everything in my life, which is kind of a little bit annoying. But I think that we are very much living that carpe diem kind of mentality when it comes to travel. But that same sentiment about about high demand is being echoed in the cruise industry. So while a lot of cruise companies are cancelling itineraries to the Middle East, I was talking to Joseph O'Donnell, who heads up the small ship cruise specialist cruise traveller, and he told me that cruise liners are not cancelling their journeys; they're just diverting to other places because that's what ships do. And he was telling me this incredible example of ships that would normally be going through the Suez Canal, which of course is in Egypt and beside Gaza. Um, they are relocating as they're doing that seasonal relocation from the warm southern hemisphere. Now they're going up north into the northern hemisphere for the northern summer to do the Europe cruise circuits. Instead of going through the Suez, going through the Middle East, they are now going to places like East Coast Africa. So so travelers who are on board those ships are actually getting additional nights free on board, and they're getting to stop in at fabulous places such as Madagascar or the Seychelles, a little stopover in Cape Town. It was really fascinating because he said to me he believes there will be an uptake in cruise travel because the cruise industry has that advantage in that the ships can move and no one is going to put their $800 million ship in a place of danger.
This week, I'm talking to Rob Goss, a UK-born, Tokyo-based writer who's lived in Japan for almost 2 decades and authored more than a dozen books about the popular island nation.
Interesting, Kirsty. This is going to be fascinating. But what made you talk to Rob in particular?
So besides my love of Japan, his latest book is called Another Japan, which is out in September, and it focuses on community, rejuvenation, and cultural preservation in rural Japan. And I'm a pretty passionate advocate for supporting these lesser known regions. So and I just love that that's what he's focused on in his latest book. And obviously, he's very well versed in Japan, given that he's lived there for almost 20 years. So he touches on his book, but he also talks about some of these lesser known places you can go, and he gives some great tips for first timers to Japan. So take a listen. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you for having me.
So nice to have you on The World Awaits. Let's start by tell us a bit about how you came to be a travel writer and an author and how you came to specialize in Japan.
Okay, well, Japan first, because that's where it started. I came over in 1999, which is a long old time ago, just after finishing college. And I came to be an English teacher for a year. But then I fell in love. I ended up staying. And after about 5 years of teaching English and about to be getting married, I figured I needed to do something I wanted to do because I didn't really enjoy teaching. And so I started studying journalism via USQ in Australia on one of their distance learning courses. And then I started selling my coursework to publications, and it just gradually started to do less teaching, more writing. And I guess it became travel and culture because that's what people from outside of Japan wanted to hear about, rather than Japanese economics or whatnot. So it wasn't by design. It just happened.
Amazing. And having lived there for 2 decades, I mean, things would have changed drastically, particularly obviously in, like you're saying, the giving people what they wanted and what they wanted to hear about in regards to the culture being so interesting. And it obviously still is because the tourist numbers are just insane. But so what have you seen about how much things have changed in regards to tourism to Tokyo and Japan generally?
Well, it's like you said, it's the numbers. The numbers have just gone crazy, haven't they? I Googled it because I wasn't sure what it was like when I came over. And it was 7 million non-Japanese came to Japan in 2005. And it was something like 40 million last year. And that's incredible, isn't it? It's just, with that, you've obviously got infrastructure in some places that's not really able to cope with that increase, even though there's been 20 years, for it to begin coping with it. So what's changed? You've got over-tourism in certain areas. And that's the biggest change. And as we were talking about before we pressed record, you have some areas not quite as extreme as Barcelona, but some areas that are beginning to get a little fed up with tourism. But on the flip side, lots of areas that would love to take some of those tourists to their own areas. So it's a difficult situation at the moment.
do you feel it like just living locally day to day because you've lived there for?
Not really. I mean, when I live in Tokyo and I live in one of the 23 wards that I guess you would refer to as the center of the city. But in my neighborhood, you don't really notice it. It's not affected by tourism. Where I notice it is if I go to Kyoto. And the crowds in Kyoto on the buses, for example, are really, really extreme at the moment. And you notice it on social media by locals complaining on social, like understandably complaining on social media about the crowds, and very often there's more media focus on foreigners behaving badly. That's quite a popular trend at the moment. But in day-to-day life, I don't notice it. I notice it when I travel for work, but I don't notice it just pottering around Tokyo.
And like we were talking about how people are sort of seeking those more off the beaten track sort of areas. So, and obviously, with your books, you've obviously covered off a lot of Japan as well. So tell us a bit about what are some of the places maybe that are a little more off the beaten track that people can go to, and why they should sort of go to those places.
Okay, have you been?
I have, but only to Shikoku and
Oh, that's one of
no, and yeah.
Yeah, well, Shikoku's one of them. That's definitely a good one. Naoshima's the art island, isn't it?
Yes, incredible.
And even though that's quite well known, it never really feels overly crowded because ferry access limits the amount of people that can go there in any given day. So Naoshima's great, and the neighboring islands like Teshima and Ogijima, Megijima, they're all arty islands. They're great. I do a lot of work up in northern Japan, in Tohoku. So if you take the Shinkansen a couple of hours up to Sendai or even further up to Aomori, you can really get away from the tourist crowds up there. Especially my favorite up there would be to go to Tono, which is just lovely rice fields, and they've got loads of folklore and things. And just cycling around there, you really feel completely different to Tokyo or Kyoto or Osaka. And people are happy to see you there. It's not like, oh no, the tourists are coming, we don't want to become like Kyoto. People are happy to see travelers
And
pop up into Tokyo.
is this sort of where your idea for your latest book that comes out at the end of this year about preservation of cultural preservation is that something that you feel like is being lost, or what are we seeing as far as or is it just that you have to choose where you go to ensure that because obviously tradition in Japan is held in such high esteem, and so you would hope that would be something that would be revered. But what I guess it's two-part question. What is that? What sort of inspired you to want to cover that, and also where can you experience that?
Yeah, well, the book, I mean, it's quite got a very long, convoluted blurb at the moment, so we need to shorten that. But basically, it's looking at rural Japan and places in rural Japan that aren't necessarily embracing tourism, but that would be nice places you could go as an alternative to over-touristed places. But also places where, because lots of rural Japan is suffering from depopulation, aging communities, crumbling infrastructure, but some places are showing green shoots through different initiatives. So we wanted to highlight a few locations that are bucking the kind of the depopulation trend or are adapting to their aging society. And in some of the cases that overlaps with tourism or, grassroots tourism. There's a place in Shikoku called Yusuhara, which is this lovely little town, and it's called itself the town of architecture because it's invested in some really interesting building, like public facilities. And that's just helped restore a bit of civic pride, and it's brought a little bit of attention and some tourism, but not too much. And so it's not a massive initiative, but it's a nice example of how some communities are doing small things that make a difference to their hometown. Or on Sado Island, people are preserving the local performing arts, like No Theatre. And that gives it something to be proud of and also can help attract visitors. So you have cultural preservation. In some towns, there are sustainability initiatives. So there's all sorts of things happening. And we wanted to try and, it's really difficult picking 20 locations when there's so many, which is why You So Hard didn't make it. But we wanted to pick places like this and just highlight some positives, because there's so much negativity about over-tourism in Japan and about, the aging society. We wanted to highlight some nice, positive rural areas that offer a little bit of hope for the future.
But it's fantastic if these places, you're saying there are so many of them, and it's hard to choose, because that means that they are looking right at, one, trying to get people off the beaten track a little more, and two, the preservation of these important traditions and culture that would potentially otherwise be lost.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there are challenges. I mean, in some places, because of depopulation, there aren't enough people there to do the jobs for tourism, to create a tourism industry. And sometimes there's not funding. Sometimes there's not the know-how. And obviously smaller places have smaller budgets for investing in these things. So there are lots of challenges, but it's really positive to go around and see a lot of grassroots initiatives and people like, okay, how can we improve our hometown for ourselves? And sometimes the knock-on effect of that is it becomes a place that people want to visit more often.
And we went to a place where there were life-size dolls.
So that's in the book, yeah.
And yes, and so that was a tourist attraction in some ways, because obviously there were these life-size dolls that are sort of sitting out, and they're literally like sitting outside. This is an abandoned sort of looking town, and the dolls are like in the hall, because there's no one in the hall using the community hall, so the dolls are in there and they're sitting outside the house. They're sitting outside on seats and benches and in windows. I mean, it was sad in a way to feel like
It's really sad, isn't it?
they're so isolated that that's what they have to do. But in another way, it's a really good way, like you say, of attracting people along. So, what are some things, and what do you wish people knew more about Japan before coming, and that people, now that you've lived there so long, you must feel like you're a local.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to preach too much, because when I turned up, I knew nothing. I learned how to ask for an ashtray, coffee, and beer, and that was about all I had to tell. And I don't need the ashtray anymore. I don't know. I think it's perfectly fine to come over and discover things as you go, and to discover the cultural differences. You don't need to really spend hours and hours on cultural primers before you go. But given the current climate with over-tourism, a little bit about the basic manners and what you should avoid doing and what you could do in Japan could be helpful at the moment. Things, like if you take the bullet train, you'll notice it's quite quiet in Japan compared to the trains I would take back in the UK, where people are on the phone or having a good laugh. As it's just, just reading the room in situations like that and doing like the locals do, to avoid just, upsetting the local ways. So manners and etiquette without going overboard in it would be the things I would talk about.
Yes. And what are some other tips for people that, before they come over, what are some other tips that you would give for anyone visiting Japan for the first time, maybe?
First time, well, if you're in Tokyo, you can pretty much go cashless nowadays, I think. But it's still worth bringing a little bit of cash, because when I'm back in the UK or visiting my son in London, I barely ever use cash. I still use cash quite a bit in Japan. So prepare a little bit of cash is still a useful bit of advice, and make it small, like 1,000 yens in coins. Because when you're out in the countryside and you want to take the bus, you're not going to be able to put a big note in the bus changing machine. So things like that can make a day go more smoothly. The exchange rate's great for coming over for everyone right now, and terrible for me going out of the country. But you can still save money with like good travel passes and things like that. So it's worth doing a little bit of planning into which rail pass should I get. If I'm going to Tohoku for 5 days, maybe I get the 30,000 yen Tohoku pass, and that saves a lot on bullet trains. But really, I don't think people need to stress too much about it. I think it's exoticized, made a bit too mystical sometimes in foreign media. And really, if you come over and you're open to the local ways and you act as you would normally act back at home, respectfully and not not being a moron, you can have a lovely time in Japan.
What are some places, being some insider tips that only locals might know about that aren't crowded, obviously, in Tokyo where you live or near where you live? What are some places that people could go to eat and drink?
One thing I really like, and I do it when I travel to different parts of Japan, is just to try and find places where you see what locals do normally. And that could be getting on Google Maps and typing in supermarket. So you go and have a look at the fish selection in the supermarket, or you see the kind of things away from the touristy souvenir stores. You can buy little snacks in the supermarket, and you really get a sense of what everyday life is like for someone like me who pops across the road to the supermarket to do the groceries at like 5 o'clock. Or, if just get into Google Maps and type izakaya and see what comes up, and just walk on into one. No one's going to be unpleasant to you. You might not be able to order anything, but the Japanese are really open and friendly. And even if they're a little shy, you'll still find a way to have a meal in any izakaya. So I don't think you need to focus on stuff you don't need to limit yourself to places that appear with English language listings or with English language menus. You can wing it and you'll find something. So be adventurous like that.
Is there one particular dish or food that you have to have when you come to?
I will have. Do you mean to enjoy or to take back and like, I was never eat that again? Also, if it's one that you'd like a memory of, like, oh, that was strange, then natto, the fermented soybean, that's a good one. I can't stand it, but that's the kind of one you could tell friends about when you get home, that this is an unusual thing to eat. I think sushi. If you eat fish, having sushi in Japan is a different experience to having sushi outside of Japan. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It really doesn't. There are places like, I've forgotten the name of the place in Nihonbashi, but you can get an 8,000 yen omakase course, which is really good value. So sushi, even revolving bar sushi's a good experience and decent quality.
And local beers.
Yeah, actually, local coffee as well. The coffee seems really good in Tokyo. I don't know what wave we're on now, third, fourth, fifth, but we have plenty of waves of coffee. Yet the coffee seems great. The local beers, the craft beers are really good. The sake is good, but I don't drink much sake. It's quite complicated to get into. So that's one of those things that if you wanted to get a tour guide to take you on a sake experience, would be a really good investment to get someone who knows about it to really get you into the topic.
If you were flying into Tokyo and you wanted to get off the beaten track, what's one place that you should go, and how do you get there?
Well, I live on the east side, so I'm going to be a bit biased. I would quite like to have a day pottering around Kiba-koen or Kiyosumi Shirakawa, which are neighboring. Well, they're basically the same place, but you've got a lovely big park in Kiba. You've got a few independent galleries scattered around the place. It's a real good hub for cafes and roasteries, because it used to be kind of have lots of little small warehouses around there. And then when the businesses went, they became the perfect place to put a roastery into. So Kiba, Kiyosumi Shikawa, you'd get a really good feel for the local area, but you'd also see some nice art, have great coffee, and you wouldn't be rushed. And I think that's the thing about Tokyo. If you can find an area where you're not rushing around and you can just absorb it a little, you'll come away with, just a different feel for the place.
And tell us a bit about your upcoming book project. So we did touch on it. We talked about it. It's coming out in September, and you're looking at sort of cultural preservation and so tell us why you decided to do this book and what it offers to travellers.
Yeah, well, so I'm the writer for it, and the photographer is called Irwin Wong, who's an Aussie. He's from Melbourne. And so we've been good friends for years. And we've often texted each other when we're traveling. It's like, oh, this town's nice. I've never heard of it, but this is nice. They've got a lovely lovely craft beer place. And after a few years of doing that, it was like, we could do a book about that. And that's basically how it started. And then we figured we needed to give it more focus than, ooh, that's nice. It's like, so we found a few places where, like a Gujo Hachiman, where you've got lots of young artisans taking traditional things, but giving little modern twists. Like a couple of guys there who take the traditional dance wear from the Gujo Odori Dance Festival, and they've turned it into everyday wear, everyday clothing. It's really quite cool. And so that's a form of cultural preservation. You're taking the traditional culture and giving it a new lease of life. And then that was the point. It's like, let's highlight all these places that have positive headlines, or doing something positive, because there's enough misery in our line of work anyway. We see a lot of negative kind of things about Kyoto being too busy and Tokyo is too busy, and Japan is getting very, very old and the population is declining, and it's all true. But there are green shoots. So we wanted to highlight all the green shoots that we could find. And that was the purpose of it. And then it turns out that lots of them would be really good alternative destinations for people who don't want to only go to Tokyo or only go to Kyoto.
Yeah, I love that idea. I love that. I love that idea of modernizing a traditional form to keep it alive and keep the other new generations inspired. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And lots of people are doing it with the old Machiya townhouses, turning them into like holiday rentals or cafes or restaurants. So it's a lovely way of preserving historic buildings as well, and creating a place like infrastructure for a small town. So rather than pulling down the old building, someone turns it into a cafe or a craft store. And there's lots of really nice examples like that.
I love that. And we will put a link so people can buy this new book when it comes out in the show notes. But we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to ask you the last question we ask all of our guests, which is, what's the most bizarre thing that's ever happened to you in your travels?
Oh, that's tricky, isn't it? I don't know if it's bizarre, but most embarrassing. I had to think hard about this in bed last night. Like, it was and it was when I was young and I went to Norway for the first time, because I shared a flat at college with a Norwegian guy, and so I spent a couple of summers working in Norway. And the first year I was going through Bristol Airport, and I'd forgotten to take the fart machine I carried around at college out of my bag, and I had it taken out by this poor lady at security. It's like, what's this? What's this device? It's like, oh, it's a fart machine. And she's like, what? It's got what's the remote control? What's it for? So I had to demonstrate. It's a random 4 sounds. You press the button, you get like a and her face was just like, you sad little man. Me. And I was allowed to take it with me, but it was just, it's not a bomb. It's nothing, it's not going to interfere with the radio. It's just a sad little man traveling with a fart machine.
Oh, that's so funny. I think it's got to be one of the funniest bizarre moments we've ever had. I love it. That's great. Look, thank you. It's been so nice chatting.
No worries.
I really appreciate your time. And we will put a link to all the information about Rob's books in the show notes.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
That was Rob Goss with a hilarious, rather bizarre moment. I mean, who doesn't love a good fart joke? And you can, I can't even say that without laughing. Gosh, am I a 14-year-old boy or what? Anyway, you can follow Rob Goss on Instagram at Rob Goss Writer, and go to tokyofreelance.com if you would like to read more of his work. And we'll put those links in the show notes.
If you'd like to help support our production costs, you can buy us a coffee at coffee.com/theworldawaits. That's ko-fi.com/theworldawaits, so we can continue to bring you inspirational travel interviews with the world's best.
Hey, Kirsty, when I was traveling in South Africa recently, I used S Daily to stay in contact, even when I was on safari, so I could share snaps from my phone straight to social media. I did try to stay in the moment, but sometimes the scene is just too good not to share.
Amazing. I love a good eSIM. Was this one easy to use?
Yep, I'm on an Android. I have an Android phone, Samsung, but the Sandy is also compatible with iPhones. But before I left home, I just downloaded the Sandy app and I chose the 5 GB plan for South Africa, activated the SIM in the SIM manager settings, and then when I touched down, the eSIM was ready to use.
Cool. There are Saily plans also in more than 200 other destinations around the world. So you can buy a single country eSIM or you can get a regional plan like a Europe plan. And they start at $6 and it works in 35 countries.
Look, I thought it was great as I didn't have to log into public networks in cafes and airports, and I didn't have to do the dodgy dance with SIM card sellers at the airport. It is created by NordVPN, so I felt pretty confident about the security features, and its ad blocker stops you wasting data on unauthorized pop-up ads as well.
To buy your eSIM, simply download the Saily app from the App Store on your phone and use our code, The World Awaits, at checkout to get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. Find out more in the show notes or at theworldawaits.au. Our tip this week is about some of the country's prettiest national parks that you may have never heard of. So while stats vary, Australia has between 500 and 650 national parks, so we thought we'd bring you a few that we think are the loveliest.
And kicking things off is Cape Hillsborough National Park in Queensland. So you might not know the name, but you will definitely know the iconic shot of its most famous residents, the wallabies and kangaroos who love to lollop across the broad beach at sunrise every day, creating the perfect "This is Australia" moment. The national park is 50 kilometres north of Mackay, and there are campsites there if you're travelling on motorhomes or you're in a van, a tent or a trailer. There's some great fishing and also fantastic walks that reward with absolutely spectacular views. I would suggest going up to the Twin Beach lookout, at the beginning of the Andrews Point Trail for panoramic views out over the Cumberland Islands.
And in Western Australia, make sure you head to Karijini National Park. This is WA's second largest national park deep in the Pilbara region, where you'll find red rock gorges and swimming holes hidden in the ancient landscape. It's 1,400 kilometres north of Perth, so getting there's a bit of an adventure in itself. And April to October are the best times to go when it's dry and out of summer's extreme temperatures, but you'll be rewarded with lots of waterfalls, and you can choose from walks from just half an hour long to 6 hours. And you'll also find WA's second tallest mountain for some pretty dramatic views.
I'm going to add Dorrigo National Park in the New South Wales, New England region. This is the fragment of the Gondwana rainforests back in the time of supercontinents. Dorrigo's postcard perfect moment is found at its Crystal Showers Falls and the gorgeous Dangar Falls. It's halfway between Sydney and Brisbane in the World Heritage listed park, which is just an hour inland from Coffs Harbour. There are campsites outside the little park. Take the Skywalk boardwalk over the canopy of this fragment of the oldest remaining rainforest in Australia. Lush and green. I do have to put a warning here. Dorrigo has the highest rainfall in New South Wales, so pack a waterproof poncho.
Yeah, I always say when I go back to New Zealand, it's so green, and then it's because it always rains.
It always rains in Dorrigo. I spent a few years around that area as a kid, and that warning was not given lightly.
No. On the Vic-New South Wales border is Mungo National Park, just north of Mildura. And what makes this desert region so spectacular is that it's home to the Mungo woman and Mungo man, the oldest human remains found in Australia at about 40,000 years old. And you can take a guided tour here too with some local Indigenous guides to really understand the ancient landscape.
And finally, I am slipping the Coorong National Park here in South Australia because this is where the novel Storm Boy was set. If you don't know the Colin Teeley novel, it is about a friendship between a boy and a pelican, Mr. Percival. And it's been made into a movie several times. Have you ever seen the movie, Kirsty?
No, I haven't.
Oh my goodness, you got the book, total tearjerker. This is like it. I think it first was made in the 70s, and then again it was made maybe about 5 years ago. So back to the park itself, 130 kilometres long. This lagoon system is a couple of hours south of Adelaide. Head to Jack Point for a really rare glimpse of pelican breeding grounds. It's just so wild and empty with great beach camping. And I actually spent a New Year's Eve bogged here in the sand dunes once. It was interesting times, but really just one of the most dramatic landscapes that's often overlooked in Australia's roundup of absolutely gorgeous national parks. Next week, I'm taking you to South Africa, where I safaried so many ways. Self-driving in Kruger National Park, in a super swanky luxury safari on a private concession nearby, on foot, and even on an e-bike down near the Cape of Good Hope.
Oh, I can't wait to hear that one. And we'd love it if you follow us on socials. You'll find us at The World Awaits podcast on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And feel free to drop us a note at hello@theworldawaits.au. Or if you're enjoying this episode, please give us a rating and review.
That's a wrap for The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.